I never get more upset when I come home after a weekend when we finish second.
Those are the words of a racer, David Richards. He's led teams to World Rally Championships, to Le Mans victories, and to challenge for Formula One wins. 2004 was the year David, his BAR team, and his driver Jenson Button came closest. 11 podiums and second in the Constructors' Championship, but a win somehow eluded them. David's experiences of success, near misses, and behind-the-scenes dealings in Formula One make him a fascinating person to listen to. Welcome everyone to F1 Beyond the Grid with me, Tom Clarkson. There's another incredible thing about David. His experience of working with drivers, from Giancarlo Fisichella and Alex Wurz in his Benetton Formula One days, to Jacques Villeneuve, Jenson and others at BAR, and of course Colin McRae and Sebastian Loeb in rallying.
There are 3 attributes you really need to be a great driver. If you mark each of those skill sets 1 to 10, very few drivers get a 30.
We talk about what those attributes are, plus the drivers David thinks do get a full score, and you'll also hear about life as an F1 team principal, what happened when he tried to bring his own company Prodrive onto the Formula One grid, and his new ambitions to make motorsport more sustainable and inclusive. I hope you enjoy our conversation. David, it's lovely to see you again, and thank you for having me at home. We're in the English countryside near Banbury, near Prodrive.
Yeah, not far away, just about 10 kilometres up the road.
You've been running Prodrive for, nearly 40 years now. But your Formula One associations came under different names. So first, let's talk about Benetton. God, it seems a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Seems like a lifetime ago, that does.
What do you remember of your year with that team?
It was quite an eye-opener to me. You know, I'd been in motorsport for quite a while at that time, so you thought, it's just another motor racing team. It came about in a very strange set of circumstances. BAT, we'd won the World Rally Championship for them on a couple of occasions by then, 96, 97, and they wanted to set up a Formula One team. So they asked me about setting up a Formula One team, what they should do and how they go about it. And I said, well, I'd actually look at the teams that have won races and go and see if we could purchase one of the teams. They said, well, we're quite keen on starting again, having a new team. I said, well, I don't think it's a great idea. I would sort of go and chat to a few people. I looked around, and the only team that I felt could be purchased at the time was Benetton. So I went down to see the family in Treviso, and we had very positive meetings, and I came back and I said, I think there's something to be done here. But BAT decided in their wisdom that they would start again and start afresh, and that's another story altogether. Perhaps talk about that later. And I came away and I thanked them very much, and that was the end of that. And about 6 months later, I get a call from Bernie Eccleston. He says, David, you remember the Benetton family, and you seem to get on very well with them, and so they remember you well, and They think the sort of time has come where Flavio needs to move on, and they would like the younger son to sort of be mentored into the team. I thought it'd be quite a good thing for you to go down and do. What do you think? So I said, okay, that sounds an interesting idea. So back I went down to Treviso, just near Venice, and met the family again. And over a weekend, we came to an arrangement where I was to mentor youngest son and sort of show him the ropes and have a year or so. It was supposed to be longer than a year as it happens, but it was an interesting year. And a big lesson learned for me. I went in there on my own, and it was very different from when I worked in a team of people around me that I knew intimately. It was a team that was, built up around Michael Schumacher and had great success before. It was a team that sort of had lost some of its key people at that point in time, and yet it was clearly great relationships inside the organisation. I was seen as the outsider, quite frankly, but it taught me a lot that year. And by the end of the year, it was clear to me that they needed an outside investor. They needed a car company to join them, and I had meetings with Ford, and I was recommending that they should partner with Ford, and the board decided that's not the direction they wanted to take, and we parted at the end of that year.
Was Formula One an itch that you'd been wanting to scratch for a while?
I wouldn't say so, but, if you're in motor racing and you haven't got Formula One on your CV somewhere, there's a bit missing.
Was it still Flavio's team in some way? Did you feel that when you describe yourself as the outsider?
Yeah, I always just to joke with them that everything was a secret. Everything was a secret in the place. Doors were closed. I thought that the sort of in the staff canteen, the chef would lock away his menus and recipes every night because everything was a secret. And I seemed to be on the outside of the secrets at the time. It was a funny experience, one that I learned a lot from. And when it came to that second opportunity in Formula One, I did things very differently.
Well, let's talk about the potential for a Ford deal at the end of that year. Because you were running Ford touring cars.
Yeah, we were. You're quite right. We were running the Ford touring car team.
So you had the relationship.
Yeah.
And they were hungry.
Well, it was the time when they were looking, I think it was just prior to them taking over with Jaguar, or was it, I can't remember the timing with Jackie Stewart, and it was all around that time, just before they came in probably with Jackie, and Jack Nasser, he was the president of Ford at the time. And they were very keen to sort of get involved in some form, especially with engines, and Cosworth had an engine facility. And it was all starting to line up. And but the Benetton family had a good relationship with Renault. And I think for some reason, despite winning the World Championship with Ford, with Schumacher, they wanted to stay with Renault.
And Rocco Benetton was 29 at the time. You stepped aside. He took over. Was he ready?
Probably not, but that might be down to my training. It's not an easy task running a Formula One team. You've got it's multidisciplinary. You've got to understand the engineering side a little bit. You've got to have a great sort of skills in the sort of man management and got to be a leader at the end of the day. And it's quite hard when you're young to come into a role like that and assume that role very easily.
Well, let's fast forward to British American racing. You touched on it a moment ago. How disappointed were you that they didn't ask you to lead that team from the outset?
I was, quite honestly. But at the same time, I'd already put my sort of, I told them very clearly that I didn't think starting afresh a greenfield site was the right approach to take. And it would take some time if you did it that way. So, yes, it was frustrating to see what was going on at the background there and not to be able to have had a hand in it to sort it out at the beginning. But of course, 2 years down the line, it all came round, and Martin Broughton, who was the chairman at the time, came to me and said, look, what about you taking this on? What
benefits do you think they saw in a greenfield site?
Well, they remember that cigarette companies were very sort of, we look back now, it seems like a lifetime ago that cigarette companies were dominant in Formula One and across a lot of motor racing around the world. But they were, they have a very clear sort of brand positioning. They had a very clear identity that they wanted to do. And it was quite hard for them to adopt a relationship with, I remember the marketing mind saying to me, do you honestly think I can sit comfortably alongside a woolly jumper company? And that was the story of the Benettons. And it was sort of, they couldn't see that alliance working. And, it was, so they wanted a clean sheet of paper. They wanted to determine their own identity from the word go. And of course, those early years, the formative years of BAR were quite exciting with the sort of dual liveries on the car.
What did you make of that?
I think it's a great idea. They were so innovative. The marketing person behind it all, Jimmy Rambacheski, was a superstar marketing guy. He was just creative. He pushed the boundaries all the time. And of course, they had the money to do it.
And what about Adrian Reynard's claim that he wanted to win his first Grand Prix?
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
Whoever makes that statement in any walk of life, I love confidence in people. I love that sort of determination. But there are some things in life, and Formula One is probably the best example of it. There are people there been a lot longer than you have and are going to do a lot better job than you are for a long time.
If you've got a small business that you're trying to build or a side hustle that you want to take to the next level, start selling today with Shopify for free and make that business idea a reality. Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run and grow your business because Shopify makes it simple for anyone to sell anywhere. from in-person point of sale to online through your website and social media channels like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. If you need help to market your business, it can help with that too, because it's filled with built-in tools that help you create, execute, and analyze your online marketing campaigns. You don't even need any skills in design or coding to get started. With a few easy steps, Shopify will help you tailor your online store and craft the look you're after, find new customers, and scale up your small business to turn it into a money-making success. Gymshark, Huel, and Tropic Skincare are all big businesses that found success using Shopify to sell their products online. In fact, every minute of every day, a new seller makes their first sale with Shopify, and you can join them. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. And thanks to their 24/7 support, you can count on help every step of the way. Sign up for a free 14-day trial at shopify.co.uk/grid, all lowercase. Go to shopify.co.uk/grid right now to grow your business today. Shopify.co.uk/grid. Let's fast forward then to 2 years later. Funnily enough, I remember, I think, doing Craig Pollock's last ever interview in December 2001 at the factory. Little did I know that about 3 days after I'd done it, it was all change. How did that come about?
Well, it was very clear something had to change, and it wasn't working. Martin Broughton was the chairman of BAT. I knew him fairly well from our rallying successes, and Jimmy Rambaczewski was the marketing director. And Martin called me up and said, look, you can obviously see our problems here. What would you be doing? And I said, well, give me the opportunity and I'll go in and sort it out for you. It took a little while because going back to my previous experience, I said, look, I'm not going on my own to this. Don't think you can just parachute one individual in and sort this out. I want to take a small group of people with me who I know very well, I trust implicitly, and we will go and sort the problem out. But I want a 5-year contract to do it. It won't happen overnight. And the challenge was, number one, look, could you control the expenditure? Because expenditure was literally, they didn't know one year to the next how much they were going to spend. Can you get us some results, please? Because we haven't got any points. And can you sell the team? Because cigarette advertising is coming to an end, and we might as well get out reasonably when we can, rather than being forced out later on. So those were the priorities, and a 5-year agreement to do it. And I had a relatively free hand, and I must admit, they were great people to work with because they just let me get on with it.
And a very different experience to Benetton, obviously.
It was because I felt more comfortable about that. I had that first experience. I knew what to expect. I was reporting into a British board of directors who, Ken Clark, the ex-Chancellor of Exchequer, was on our board. He was chairman of our board, in fact. A great guy to work with. And
how clued up about Formula One was Ken?
He was very, very switched on. You would find Ken sitting in the grandstand at Silverstone watching a Grand Prix and with his son there, and he was, I say, clued up in as best anyone could be. He was a sort of, had another career, because it's, there's the people who are in the hub of it really sort of live it day in, day out, as you know.
How quickly did you start to see change on the ground?
We set about a 90-day program to start with. We came in and said, this is what we're going to achieve. This is how we're going to make decisions after 90 days. We're going to do all this, assess everything quickly. We're not going to muck about. And after 90 days, we'll tell everyone exactly how things are going to change. And I think we did that pretty well. I think we went in, we were fairly clear in our views about what was right, what was wrong, what we needed to do. And as I said, it's not something that changes. You can't just wave a magic wand and create a competitive Formula One team overnight. As we've got so many examples of that even today. And it was quite a tough couple of years, the first couple of years. But the great thing is we had the support of BAT. We had the finance behind us as well from BAT. They didn't skimp on that at all, and it was great stuff. It was enjoyable.
I look back at the early 2000s and think that was peak Formula One excess in terms of all the tobacco companies. You had McLaren with 3 test teams, Ferrari with 3 test teams. It was just extraordinary time to be in the sport.
It was a little excessive, wasn't it? You know, do you remember the launches today? They just pull a blanket off a car and sort of turn up at Barcelona and say, here's our new car. And in those days, we'd have dancing girls, we'd have the Eiffel Tower in the background, we'd have everything. It was just extraordinary.
Yeah. Now, 2002 was the transition year, it felt. And then 2003, it really started to bear results, didn't it? And you brought in, for 2-3, Jenson Button. He just had 2 difficult seasons at Benetton / Renault. Why Jenson? What did you see in him?
Well, firstly, I always think that my skill set is not technical. It's more about setting a culture in the organisation. And cultures in organisations don't happen overnight. It's about sort of getting everyone to believe in the same things and sharing that and having a great belonging within the organisation. The lesson I learnt from Colin McRae and having Colin win the World Championship in rallying for us was that there was a great sense of belonging around a British driver within a team. There are great foreign drivers, of course there are, but I noticed very strongly how the team gelled when they had this lovely empathy with Colin. And I thought we'd actually achieved the same thing with Jenson as well, young British driver. And to be fair, that's what happened in many ways.
But what was interesting with that is that the team was partly set up around Jacques Villeneuve. So he wasn't that man. He wasn't the glue that you needed.
No, Jacques' a very complicated individual. I've grown to like Jack over the years, actually, and we chat regularly now when I see him. It was a very fraught relationship at that time. But
Why?
I think Craig came between us, quite frankly. I think Craig wanted to be the influencer with Jack and the team, and he wouldn't let me get close to Jack, and he probably poisoned my relationship with him. And Jacques come and spoken to me subsequent, and she said that to me, and so I didn't get the best out of Jacques, and that quite frankly disappointed me because I think we probably could have worked quite well together, but that wasn't going to be the case.
And he left a race early, didn't he, at the end of 2003? But why just had to move on? Too difficult? What was the reason?
It was getting very fraught, and it was, you can't have in any organisation, let alone a racing team, the tail wagging the dog, and drivers. Yes, they're fated by the fans, they're fated by you journalists as well. They're the most influential people in any team, but they have to be part of the team, and they have to play by the team rules and engage with the team. And if they don't, then they have to go.
Well, Jenson, as much as he was that person, can I take you back to the German Grand Prix of 2004? Jenson had a difficult qualifying. I think he was 13th on the grid, charges through the field to second. I remember there being celebrations in the pit lane. I think cigars and everything were out. And then news broke the following week that he'd signed for Williams. Was that a bit of a slap in the face? I guess it was.
Well, again, I look back on Jenson as a young racing driver, and so often is the case, and he more so than most, I would say, was very badly advised and influenced by management. And he had management around him that were self-interested, and they didn't think of him first, and nor did they look at the bigger picture. Again, I see this in so many occasions that drivers who've lost their way or sort of lost big opportunities because they've trusted management who've not really had their own best interests at heart and had different views of things. And, imagine you're 23, 24 years old, you're put into this world you're a racing driver. You're there to drive the motor car as fast as you possibly can. You rely on sort of lawyers and managers and people around you to make these big decisions for you. But if they're not professional and they're not competent and they don't sort of behave appropriately, then you end up in a big mess as we ended up with then.
Was it delivered to you as a fait accompli, or was it we're thinking of Williams?
No, there was no...
David, come on, what have you got? What can you offer me?
No, not at all. There was no conversation, no correspondence whatsoever. But we obviously didn't take that lying down, and we ended up in the Court of Arbitration, the contract arbitration court of the F1, and we won the case. Clearly, it was completely flawed.
How did that change your relationship with Jensen?
I guess it did at the time. I look back now, and we're quite good pals now when we see each other. But it's obviously these things do temper you slightly. But I blame the management completely. I cut the management off, and he changed managers.
Can we develop that a little bit more? How you, as the team principal, deal with driver management? It strikes me that you're the sort of person that wants to go straight to the driver. So when the driver manager tries to get involved, what do you do?
Well, it does tend to be a bit of a problem, and it's the same. I suspect in many walks of life there are similar analogies to this. But in Formula One teams and racing teams, you do have the managers who have to justify themselves. They have to justify a role for themselves, and often the best ones and. Who's Michael's
Willy
Weber and people like that. They are just nurturing the arrangements along, tickling them when it's necessary, and sort of holding you to account when you don't deliver on your side of the bargain. Others try and take over the whole relationship. Some of them, it got so bad on one occasion with actually Jensen's management. I got so frustrated by these people I couldn't deal with them. I thought to myself, I had a big argument with them, and they said, well, nothing you do about this. The contract is very clear. You have to give us 2 passes for the motorhome, all races. We're going to be sitting there in that motorhome every race from now to the end of the season. I thought, oh, God, how am I going to... I couldn't cope with this idea. So luckily I went to see Bernie, and we took their paddock passes away so they couldn't get to the motorhome. Bernie was a great help in that one.
Yeah. And it sounds like you had a great relationship with Bernie, because he put you in contact with the Benetton family, and was he helpful throughout the whole BAR?
Hey, Bernie's, I don't think anyone should claim to honestly be a great friend of Bernie's, because, there will be exceptions to that. But Bernie runs a business, or ran a business, and ran it with his own, very clear motives at heart. And he was always very fair with me. I would never say a word against him, but it was always very clear where his interest lay.
What if I told you that every time you used the internet, your activity was being logged? You might not realise it, but your internet provider is allowed to store logs of every website you've ever visited, and legally, they're able to sell this data to anyone. One way to help protect your privacy is to use Expressvpn. When I go online using Expressvpn, I know that my privacy is fully protected. That's because Expressvpn reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers, so internet providers aren't able to log online activity. Not even Expressvpn can see it, because they use trusted server technology. Expressvpn is so confident in their no logs claim, they even had one of the biggest assurance firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, audit their technology. I find such peace of mind knowing that my data is protected no matter where I find myself in the world or what device I'm using to access the internet. And you could too. Stop letting people keep logs of what you do online. Visit expressvpn.com/grid right now and find out how you can get 3 months free. That's ExpressVPN, expressvpn.com/grid. expressvpn.com/grid to learn more. Let's talk about Honda now, because of course we've seen huge development from them in recent seasons. They win the World Championship last year with Red Bull and Max Verstappen. What kind of Honda were you dealing with at that time with BAR?
It's a very tricky relationship in those days. Honda's obviously got an enormous pedigree and track record, but the relationship between an engine manufacturer and the team and the chassis manufacturer has got to be as one. And I think, quite frankly, that's why Mercedes has been so successful. The Brixworth relationship with the team is, it is just one. And if it doesn't work like that, then you have problems. And I remember Jeff Willis and the team coming to me one day, and I don't know when it was, 2003, 2004, around there. They said to me, look, we've got a bit of a problem here, because quite frankly, the engine is too heavy, it's too thirsty on fuel, and we just can't package it in the car properly. And you're going to have to go to Japan and sort this out for us. So off I go to Japan again, sit down with the team, and they say, look, guys, here's the problem. And they said, well, hang on a minute. Our priority is to give you 1,000 horsepower. the president has set us this challenge to give you 1,000 horsepower, and that we have done. We have 1,000 horsepower to give you for your engine this year. Yes, but we can't put it in the car. It doesn't fit properly, and it's too heavy, and it drinks fuel. And we've got to work as one. It's a collaborative approach we've got to take to this. And it was quite fraught, the relationship, if I'm honest with you, at the time. And it was, two different cultures, that Oriental Japanese culture against our own. And I don't think we managed it as well as we could have done at the time. We probably could have done a lot better.
And does it frustrate you that you didn't win a race in 2004? You got, 11 podiums, 10 for Jensen, 1 for Takuma Sato.
Yeah. Second in the manufacturers.
Constructors.
Yeah. It was a frustration. No, it was, I guess when you've come from nowhere, it's seen as a success, but no one applauds finishing second. And I find it, I never get more upset when I come home after a weekend when we finish second. But no, there were great things to take away from that year. The year was, the team really came into their own, the confidence built. And, I look at that team now and I see so many faces of Mercedes that were there then. And I'd like to think in some very small way the DNA carried through.
Sure it did. I'm sure it did. Does it frustrate you that you didn't get another crack in 2005 to continue the work that you'd started?
Yeah, Honda came on board, and remember the goal was to sell to Honda or to sell to somebody. Honda were the obvious buyers. They found dealing with me quite frustrating, I think. I was quite clear on what I wanted to do and what I think we needed to do in terms of whether it was the tyre change we did that year, whether it was getting rid of Jacques and putting Takuma in. I thought would please them, but never mind. So there were lots of issues that were sort of points of conflict. So I think at the end of the year, one of the great goals for them when they bought the team was to get rid of me. So it's, we had 2 years left on our contract.
Well, that's another point.
So it worked out quite nicely.
No, but I suppose that gave you perhaps the capacity to start thinking about Prodrive and Formula One. Now, let's talk about that, because I think, if my research has been right anyway, that there have been 2 occasions where you've got close.
Yeah, we're very close.
Let's talk about the first one.
The first one was when Max decided that he was going to open up an extra place on the grid for a Formula One team. And we put our hat in the ring and said we'd like to do that. And we were, if I remember correctly, almost gifted the opportunity. Now, at the time, the Concorde Agreement was just changing. It was the end of the Concorde Agreement. I think a lot of teams hadn't signed up to the new ones. Some people had signed a letter of intent with the FIA, or maybe even signed a sort of, it wasn't a formal contract. They'd actually signed they would continue on the same basis. So, and there was a bit of a divide and rule going on between Bernie and Max and the teams at the time. It was quite challenging. The Concorde Agreement got delayed. And when one of the things Max had done, he changed a lot of the IP in the cars themselves to allow you to, I can't remember how it changed, but it came quite dramatically, which I looked at this quite carefully and talked to Martin Whitmarsh at McLaren, and it was very clear to us that we could actually just have a second team, with
So in layman's terms, we're just talking customer cars.
Well, if they want to describe that, well, here's the story. I went to Bernie and I said, look, Bernie, I've looked at this and I think we can just have another car. He said, well, it's a great idea for McLaren because you can just have last year's cars and they'll be happy, get the cars running, a bit of income going into them. You'll have a good kick out. I said, no, that's not the idea, Bernie. I'm going to run the current car. And they said, you what? I said, well, how's that going to work? He said, well, McLaren can build the cars, no problem. Testing is going to be dramatically limited next year. We will do testing alongside them, so we double the mileage of their testing. We've agreed that we can put young drivers into our cars. Mercedes have accepted that they would supply another team for engines, so we'll just run a sister team, and we can sort of if they've got excess sponsors, which was ironically, which was quite amazingly the thing at the time, and everyone's a winner. And it quietly dawned on everybody around us that this was going on. And the first move was David will never get the money together to run the thing. And then they never get a proper car together. And then, look what's going on. So then we got Williams, who'd signed a pre-contract for the Concorde Agreement for the following year. They'd actually signed it. I don't know whether they'd done an exchange of letters or something with Max. And the wording in their agreement was, from Max to them, that the basic terms of the Concord Agreement would remain as they were. And they relied on that to say you can't change the IP rules around having, sort of, as you would describe it, a customer car.
This was for 2008. So how much work was all this for you?
Oh, we'd spent a lot of time doing it. We'd sort of, ask Martin Whitmarsh. He knows the sort of story from the McLaren side of the fence. And
So you got all...
everything was lined
your
up to
ducks
go.
in a row.
And but there was a deadline. They had to do the production of the cars by October, if I remember correctly, to get it, to have a confirmation by then, and engines and everything. We had to press the button. And then what happened then, Williams, they served notice of pre-notice to FIA, to Bernie Ecclestone, to myself, to McLaren, just saying if this goes ahead, they will basically will be in breach of the Concord Agreement and breach of this and that and the other, and everyone quietly backed away.
Am I right to suggest you were going to do it with 60 people? 60 something?
I can't remember the number at the time, but it was modest. It was modest. It wasn't probably 60. Probably, these things you always start with 60 and you end up with 200, don't you?
Being impartial now, do you think it was the right decision for the sport not to change the IP rules?
I think it would have changed the face of things. It would have made it more affordable for people straight away. We wouldn't have sort of gone to where we are today, possibly, if that's the case. I think you would have had sister teams, feeder teams for each of the main teams. It would have knocked out some of the people at the back of the grid, possibly, and that would have been, some would think that wasn't really good for the sport. It would be far more elitist, possibly. There's arguments for both sides of it, I'd say.
And had you got as far as thinking about drivers?
I don't remember, if I'm honest. I'm not trying to be evasive, but I honestly, I'm not a great one for looking backwards. I sort of, history's history, and, I'd rather look at today and what's going to happen next week.
We'll come on to that later, but go on, Dio. I mean, I can't remember, who were the good guys in 2008? Lewis Hamilton. He was driving a McLaren. What about it? A Prodrive.
It would have been lovely. But no, it's, I honestly, genuinely can't remember who we were talking to at the time.
So that must have been hugely frustrating. And then 2 years later, I think, for 2010, you tried again. Is that right?
Yeah, they opened it up formally then. And they said they would accept tenders then for the places, which they were going to issue 2 grid places, if I remember correctly. So I revisited the Mercedes relationship again, and we had lined up an agreed Mercedes engine. Then everything seemed to be in place for that. Behind the scenes, what was going on was that Max and Bernie were trying to sort of break the stranglehold of the manufacturers. And the manufacturer's stranglehold was around engines. So what the intention was then to fund a Cosworth engine to come in to, then they could have a customer engine to supply as many customer teams as they wanted. So no longer would the manufacturers have a grip on the situation. And so it was important to Max and to Bernie that they had at least 2 new teams that were going to take Cosworth engines at the time. And I'd said to, I had a call from, I think I had a call from either Bernie or Max, I can't remember, on the day when the tender was all being finalised, said, you've got to switch to Cosworth, otherwise you're not going to be in. And I said, well, I'm not. We've got an arrangement. I'm going to stay with where I am. Thank you very much. At that moment, we knew that the thing was lost.
God, how frustrating.
Mind you, we probably would have ended up bankrupt 2 years later, because that's what happened to the teams that joined at the time.
What about when Honda pulled out at the end of 2008? Did you think of trying to buy what was there? And
I spoke to Ross.
Sort of do a Ross Brawn kind of.
No, Ross and I just had a chat. It never led to anything. We had, I went to see him. I remember going over to see him on one occasion and say, is there anything we can do together? And there didn't appear to be at the time. And so we never carried on the conversation.
And what about now? Is Prodrive F1 something you'd consider now?
We'd consider anything now, quite frankly. We always look at things with an open mind, but it's a different world than the old days. If I turned the clock back 30 years ago, I should have started a Formula One team then. Doing one now, you've got to be a billionaire and sort of and prepared to lose half of it to get the thing going.
Now, for people listening who aren't familiar with Prodrive, just give us a little flavour as to the sort of stuff you're doing both in motorsport and outside now.
Well, historically, our sort of roots have been in rallying. We've won the World Rally Championship half a dozen times. We've touring car racing with various manufacturers. We've won British title many times. Australian, we've been racing the V8s in Australia. More recently, we've run all of Aston Martin's GT racing for them in the last 18 years now. And so we've had a number of Le Mans victories with the GT and Le Mans championships. We've, what else have we done? We've done rallycross, we've done various things. And today we still operate with Aston Martin and GT, so all GT races at either Le Mans or at Sebring. We've got private teams all around the world that we support, and so that's on the sports car racing side. It's an important part of the business. We built a Dakar car recently with the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Bahrain. So that's to compete on. We finished second with Sebastian Loeb driving Dakar.
The dreaded second, David.
I know that's another one. You spend 2 weeks driving around a desert and you finish second. Imagine how that feels.
The pedigree is clearly there, isn't it?
Yeah,
do you have the energy for Formula One if the opportunity came?
In certain roles, it could be possible. I've learned to say in life, you never say never. But the direction I'm taking the company now is, I feel very, I wouldn't say I'm an evangelist, but I feel quite strongly about the role we need to play now in technology and solving some of the environmental issues we face. And so it's no great coincidence that we're running Lewis Hamilton's Extreme E program and the electric cross-country, and we've been looking at a Formula E team as well. We're looking at hydrogen, for instance, and we're working on a number of road car projects. And at the moment in the workshop, there's a 15-ton electric truck that we're working with someone. We did the hybrid transit van for Ford a few years back, the development on that. So we're doing lots of interesting ideas. We worked the Dakar. We ran on a sustainable fuel. We ran on a Gen 2 biofuel. And I think the intellect that we've got in our racing teams, and this goes across Formula One, and I hope that a lot of the Formula One teams who are now cost cap are going to use the resource to help find their way out of some of the problems we've created for ourselves over the last few years. We burnt enough fossil fuels to do all sorts of damage, and I don't want my grandchildren to look back at me and say I didn't return and do something about it.
I thought you were being associated quite closely with the FIA presidency last year. You didn't go for it. Did you think about it?
Yeah, we thought about it a lot, but I'm 70 this year. I'm quite good at delegating. I'm probably just lazy, actually, but I do want to develop next generation. I'm always trying to engineer myself out of a job and find people that can do it better for me underneath and mentor them to the role. And I felt that it's a younger person's role. And so it's we made a conscious decision that I wouldn't stand for it.
But you are chairman of Motorsport UK. What kind of nick is motorsport in the UK in?
It's quite difficult to judge after 2 years of pandemic. I think we've come through the pandemic extremely well. We were one of the sports that got back running again, racing again, quicker than most. Unfortunately, rallying, you can't say that for rallying, where we were restricted in Wales and two people in a car. That created problems for the legislation on the COVID situation. But so that suffered during the period. We've got to do a lot of work to get that back up and running again. But just generally, the license numbers, the number of marshals we've got is as strong as it's ever been. And running an organisation, a governing body, historically, it's been, everyone's just regarded as a monopoly. All you do is you have to go there to get your license, and you've got to get a permit if you want to run a race meeting or run a rally. And but I hope that one of the key things we've done is to turn this round and realise that these people are our customers. And we have a role to play with our customers, and we need to deliver a service. And we've moved the operation from on an industrial slate in Slough, why it was there, goodness only knows, to the new Heritage Centre in Bicester. Great place, and all our members are willing and very welcome to come and visit any time. And again, I come back to the culture of the organisation. The whole place has changed to understand that we do have customers out there. We have a job to do. And it's not just about issuing licenses and permits. Our role is to promote the sport. And our role is to take the sport into areas where historically hasn't been, to develop the grassroots of the sport. And there are obviously things we're not doing right still, not perfectly for sure. But the intent is there and the drive is there. And we've got the talent of the people there to do it now.
You might have heard me talk about Harry's and their fantastic razors before, but did you know that they also have a skincare range? Because getting the smoothest, cleanest shave possible starts with your skin. Harry's have a huge range of products designed to help keep your skin flake-free, looking healthy, and you feeling good in the process. And all of their products are alcohol and cruelty-free. Their signature face wash is the perfect addition to any Harry's shave plan. Gently exfoliating your face before you shave means you're less likely to suffer from ingrowns and breakouts. It's non-drying, so you can even use it when you don't need to shave to help keep your skin in top condition. Beyond the Grid listeners can get hold of a free travel-sized face wash by redeeming a free Harry's trial set at harrys.com/grid. All you cover is £3.95 for delivery. In the trial set, you'll get an expertly engineered weighted handle to help you have more control over your shave, a 5-blade cartridge complete with precision trimmer to tackle those tricky corners, a travel blade cover, and handy foaming shave gel. And don't forget that freebie face wash. Make sure you support the podcast and start your own skincare journey by redeeming a free Harry's trial set. All you cover is £3.95 for delivery. Your freebie will be added at checkout. Just head to harrys.com/grid. That's harrys.com/grid. Oh, David, this is a conversation that's had in pubs across the world. But given your experiences in rallying and Formula One, you're probably very well positioned to talk about drivers, rallying versus Formula One. You've had world champions in Colin McRae, Richard Burns, Peder Solberg. Jensen's gone on to win the world title in Formula One, of course. Jacques Villeneuve, world title. Who is the best driver that has been on your books?
Well, it's interesting. I often asked that question. I always say that if you want to be a great driver, there are 3 attributes you really need to be a great driver. You've got to have an innate skill. That's number 1. You've got to have a work ethic. That's number 2. And you've got to be a team player. You've got to pull the team around you. And there are very few drivers, if you mark each of those skill sets 1 to 10, very few drivers get a 30. You know, I remember Michael Schumacher. I would have given him a 30. I watched him in that team, and he had he had a great team of people around him, but he ticked all those boxes. And I've watched, and you compensate one for the other. You know, Colin McRae, who was a great skill set, enormous team player, got the team really around him, but you know, he didn't want to do the testing, quite frankly, and he left that to Carlos Sainz. And Carlos Sainz had enormous work ethic and sort of good skills, but couldn't get the team working around him very well. So all these things play and you know, funny enough, I'm working with Sebastian Loeb now. 9 times World Rally Champion. He's driven for us now for the last 18 months in Dakar. Now working with him. Well, we've been working with him Extreme E, with Lewis's team. And it's taken us a year to embrace him in the team. I've just watched the person change during that period of time as he's sort of been remote and he's come into the team. And as he's come into the team closer to us, he's become better and better. And the team's also rallied around him as well. So it's a changing dynamic. So, you know, I can do the marks out of 30 for each of the drivers if you want, but I don't think that'll be a long task.
Prodrive F1.
Yeah.
Who would you hire of the people that you've worked with so far in your career?
Well, you know, it's a different era now. So, you know, I'm looking at the guys on the grid now. You know, I'd love to have that Mercedes lineup of Lewis and George. I think that is just phenomenal. But then look at the Ferrari lineup of Charles and Carlos Jr. If you want me to name any one driver I've worked with of late, I never fail to get impressed by Sebastian Loeb. He came to us as he's 47 years old. He's won 9 world championships. He gets into our car in Dakar. He drives around the whole of Dakar for 2 weeks and finishes, that dreaded second. And then he gets out of that, goes to Monte Carlo, wins Monte Carlo, gets out of that, then goes to Race of Champions in Sweden and wins that as well. You know, that is something,
he had a good month,
something extraordinary.
And actually, he tested the Toro Rosso back in the day and really impressed the team.
Yeah, well, at Le Mans, I think he did very well at Le Mans as well. Yeah. So he's an extraordinary talent. But these drivers, you measure the difference in minutiae now at the front of the grid, don't you?
I did also want to ask you about some of the team principles in Formula One now, because you've worked with so many of them. I guess Lawrence Stroll through the Aston Martin program?
I haven't had much dealings with Lawrence. I've known Lawrence from the old days when he was always often at Grand Prix, and talked to him. But I don't know Lawrence particularly well.
Okay, but Christian Horner?
Yeah, I know Christian very well. In fact, Christian came, I remember his father telling me, it was a long time ago now, 25 years ago, his father, Gary, came to me and said, look, Christian was in Formula 3000, I think it was at the time, and he was a very competent driver, but he was obviously not going to move on to the Formula 1 or anything, and Gary saying, what can we do? And we ended up setting up a team together, and we had a team together with a Russian sponsor, if I remember correctly, Lukoil at the time, and Christian was the team manager then, and we were the partners in the team, and that's, I guess, another place where it all began.
Crikey, so the Arden was a joint venture between yourselves
Prodrive
and the Horners.
Mm.
Crikey, well, he hasn't stopped, he hasn't stood still, has he?
Nope.
And what did you make of Christian and Toto last year? It all got quite excitable between the two of them, didn't it?
That was, I think, one of the biggest climaxes to a season I can ever remember, and the tension in the team must have been extraordinary between the two sides. And I always used to say to people, when they, tell me what it's like in Formula One, a season of Formula One. And I likened it to back in the medieval times, in the Crusades. I said, well, you get on your horse in January and you march off, and off you go to the other side of the world, and you come back in December, and that's it. And you don't speak to anyone in between. You're just working flat out all the time. And the intensity of the pressure on the individuals and the people in those teams, especially now with so many races, is just, I honestly don't think people can ever comprehend it. If you're in a normal job, you just cannot imagine what's going on in the pressure of a Formula One team.
Well, DR, there's no sign of you slowing down.
Nope, that's for sure.
And I really hope we see Prodrive in Formula One at some point. Thank you so much for your time. David has only one pace, and that's flat out. He's one of the busiest people I know, yet he always manages to find time for you in his schedule. He's also one of the most rational people in motorsport, and always has one eye on the big picture, which is why he's such a suitable chair of Motorsport UK. David, thanks for your time. I really enjoyed reliving the Benetton and BAR days. Now, as ever, please send in your thoughts and stories about David, be they about Formula One or rallying. Send them to me at Tom Clarkson F1 or use the hashtag F1BeyondTheGrid, and I'll read out a handful at the end of next week's show. Which of course brings me on to what you sent in about George Russell after last week. There's a lot of love out there for George. Let's start with this from Katarzyna Rakna. As for what George stands for, one phrase of his that has struck me is his focus on becoming the best version of himself and on learning from everything. It's a powerful message that can resonate universally, as it does with me. Thanks for the great conversation. Well, George is certainly managing to be the best version of himself, isn't he? And thanks for the note, Katarzyna. Great to hear from you. Next, let's hear this from Neville Taylor. A great listen to a future world champion, he says. What a remarkable guy George is. Humble, honest, down to earth, and fiercely competitive. What a great future this guy has. Well, it's hard to disagree with anything you say there, Neville. George is remarkably normal and an engaging character, a star in the making, no doubt about that. And what about this from my chum Greg Rust in New Zealand? Just listen to George Russell on Beyond the Grid. Brilliant. Young racers should give it a listen, a really engaging and insightful conversation, and love the tennis parallel too. Thanks, lads. Well, thanks to you, Rusty. It's great to hear from you. And the tennis parallel was indeed a good one, although George admitted he's more of a badminton man, didn't he? Well, let's leave it there for messages for this week, but thank you so much to everyone who wrote in. I love receiving everything you write, and I read it all. Now, if you've enjoyed hearing from David, please check out our huge back catalogue of interviews, which includes many of the people we talked about here: Jenson Button, Flavio Briatore, Jacques Villeneuve, and many more. And for the fastest way to get our new episodes every Wednesday, please follow the podcast and leave us a rating or a review. We love reading those as well. Thanks for listening. F1 Beyond the Grid is produced by Formula One and Audioboom Studios. Until next time, keep it flat out.